I'm loving doing this podcast, by the way. It's
Good. I'm so glad. I know.
it,
I feel like we've both been so busy. We haven't had a lot of time for a catch up and a holistic look at how it's going. We just
yeah,
kind of show up, record, and then
yeah.
that.
But I feel like we're really building an audience of people who really love the show. So
Me
it's
too.
yeah,
I feel like it's some of the best content I've ever put out. I
yeah,
love doing it and recording it with you. I love the feedback. I love the growth, even though it's still very early days.
yeah,
It's encouraging, and I love the potential.
yeah. I do too.
You're listening to Biz Buds. Super authentic, actionable advice.
We're gonna open the kimono and show you what's inside.
I'm scared to see inside Mike's kimono.
Hey, it's Mike and Tom with Biz Buds.
If you like geeking out over business, marketing, and entrepreneurship, this is the podcast for you.
Hey, welcome back to Biz Buds, all you Biz Buddies. We are super excited to be with you today. I'm here with my mate, Tom Ross Media Co. How are you doing, Tom?
Yeah, I'm really good. I've got good energy today, I have to say, Mike. I'm excited to record.
Looks like you might be full of beans this morning.
I am. I had beans for lunch. Kidney bean wraps.
Cheerio, old chap. Cheerio.
Just worse. It's getting worse.
I even practiced that before we started. I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna wail on the British accent this
I
time."
apologize, Biz Buddies, especially any English listeners out there.
I am gonna start really. I've dedicated part of my soul to learning how to speak with a British accent much better than my pathetic attempts so far.
Well, if you want to book a very expensive one-on-one coaching session with me, I'd be happy to help.
It's going to cost double because of
Yeah.
where I'm starting. There's so much work to be done. Here we are going to talk today. This is episode number 28 of the Biz Buds Podcast. We're so glad you are with us once again. Tom and I were just talking before we got on the podcast today about how much we love doing the show. We love the feedback from our audience. We love connecting with the Biz Buddies out there, the people who send us DMs. We love reading the reviews that are sent in. So thank you so much for your support. We just really, really love it. How do you feel about all that, Tom?
Yeah, so appreciative. Shout out to Eva. Actually, Eva just shared us all over her social media and said we were her favorite podcast. So we appreciate you, Eva.
It's a big deal, and she's great. Really great content. All right. Today, we are going to talk about big ideas that changed our business. Tom and I have both been doing this for a couple decades each, and we've hit some bangers. They say bangers in Britain. I feel like that's
Bangers and mash.
bangers. We've hit some bangers in our 20 years. And today we're going to kind of hammer on some of the big things that these paradigm shifts, these epiphanies that we had, these things that we learned somewhere that changed the course of our lives as entrepreneurs. And we've both jotted down a handful of different things that we've experienced that we want to share with you today on the podcast. Tom, why don't you kick us off and get started with your first banger?
Okay, full disclosure here. Some of mine are things that we've discussed already on other episodes, but I think it's going to be hopefully really helpful to consolidate them into one episode, because these have been the paradigm shifts, as Mike just said, that have transformed my career. Like literally, some of them, the first one I'm going to share in a sec, it's like a sound bite, and it's like whoosh. Like the first time I heard it, I was like, holy crap, I've been doing it all wrong. And so I think packing all of these together and then doing our tennis match at the end is hopefully going to have at least one of these be a moment like that for a lot of the listeners.
That's what we hope for. Yep. Right there.
Where you take it away and it changes the rest of your career potentially.
Exactly.
No
Good.
pressure, Mike.
No pressure.
Okay, so,
no pressure
right,
on our 45-minute podcast here to change lives
Yeah,
forever.
So my first one, I can't even remember if I shared this with you before, Mike, but one of my previous business mentors once said to me, you can either use your audience or you can serve them. Have I shared that on this show before? I can't recall.
Not in that phrasing. No.
Okay. So that's exactly how he phrased it. when he told me. And it was such a game changer because he then went on to elaborate how 99% of people are using their audience, right? It's for selfish reasons. I'm going to get more sales. I want to get more followers. I want to get more likes because it makes me feel good, and on and on and on. And when you see how people operate, they're doing it in pretty selfish ways. And when you flip that on its head, and it becomes like the whole thing of, it's not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country, right? It's like, it's not what your followers are, not what your audience can do for you. It's what you can do for your audience. It really did change everything in my career, because I then shifted into a service-based mindset, and I started realizing that I worked for my audience, not the other way around. And then it just becomes fun in terms of like, how far can you push that? And when you think about service, for me, I think about like the fanciest 5-star hotels and restaurants and that kind of thing. Like, think of how incredible the service is there. And when you layer that on top of your marketing and your content and your brand and everything you're doing, well, how can you provide that 5-star service for as many audience members as possible? That then leads into real actionable things within the level of customer service and community management you do. It makes you really deploy empathy harder and put yourself into your customers' shoes and try and understand, well, what are their pain points using my product or service? What do they really want and need? How can I, bring them more joy and just a better experience overall? So again, it's constantly giving. It's like, how can I give more? How can I serve better? And I did a tweet. In fact, let me read this word for word. This was like my own little variant of this. I just put this on my Instagram, and it resonated with a lot of people. It seemed to do pretty well. So I said, when you change your mindset from how can I get more followers to how can I help my audience more, everything changes. And I specifically shared that because everything did change when I realized that simple truth.
The satisfaction comes from the connection, the altruistic piece of it. It's the immediate reward is knowing, oh, I helped this person. The byproduct reward is financial gain of some kind. And you don't sell anything. You and I are both very not salesy in our free content that we share. We have paid services, paid content that is available, but we're not salesy on it, but it still sells because we're not focused on, even though we're not focused on selling it, it still sells as a byproduct of what you're talking about here, of serving the people and giving to them without any expectation of something in return.
And it's hard to do that because there's a lot of people that think they're doing this or they're trying to do it and they're not. There's an ulterior motive. They're employing the whole bait and switch thing, right? I'm going to pretend to be your friend. I'm going to give you a little modicum shred of value. And then I'm immediately going to kind of follow up with a sales pitch or something like that. Yeah. And it sucks. Like, people's bullshit radar has never been more finely tuned. Yeah. They can see it a mile off. People don't buy that anymore.
Yeah. I'm with you. And my number one point is very similar to yours in that it makes money a byproduct. But one of the big paradigm shifting things that happened for me was before I even started my career. It was when I was the failing freshman in university, and my parents gave me that book, Do What You Love, The Money Will Follow. And I had that paradigm shift of, oh, I get it. Don't choose a career because I'm trying to make a bunch of money and whatever. Choose something that I love to do and let money be the result of doing it well, of being passionate about it. And that for me was my number one, not my number one most important, but it was the first one of the paradigm shifting moments in my career. And it's what made me decide to go into being a creative and pursuing this with the thought that someday I'll make, a meager middle class life. And instead I've out-earned most doctors my age. So the money truly did follow because I was doing something that I loved for a living.
And I love that so much. I have so many friends that went into banking, investment banking, and that kind of thing. And I had moments of jealousy when I was like, oh my God, like I'm so far behind them financially. And then every year that goes by, many of them kind of share that actually they're getting increasingly unhappy and dissatisfied with their career, whereas my happiness is compounding, and so is the money that follows. And so I'm such a believer in it. And for anyone that's maybe a bit younger or slightly earlier in their career journey, it's very hard to see that and to say that, because when I was living this, I was like, oh man, like it takes a lot of faith that it's all going to work out, and that the money will follow, and that it's going to be okay, when you feel like you're losing and your peers are winning. But the real losing is being unhappy.
I mean, there's no money in the world that can replace happiness. I've lived overseas. I've lived in South America. I've traveled to a lot of different places that have a much more challenging economic condition than what I have in the United States. But the people were not less happy. And in fact, in more cases, they were more happy than the people who I know who have extreme wealth. There's happiness does not come from money. Money does not buy you happiness. It's other things that buy happiness for you. And I mean, anybody who's traveled anywhere can see that we find happiness in the small things in life, not necessarily the Lamborghinis and mansions. So yes, there's a certain income level that makes life easier, and it's easier then to become happy.
You know, it's proven. Do you know what it is?
What is it?
I think this might be in pounds, but it's 60 grand.
Yeah.
Apparently. So your happiness scales with money.
Yeah.
But then it reaches a plateau. And this has been scientifically proven that people that earn 60 grand are equally happy to people that earn $1 million.
Yeah.
Like it just levels off.
I believe that. I saw that in my career, that as soon as I started earning enough where I wasn't worried about paying my bills, or wasn't worried about food on the table, once you hit the threshold where you have enough income to cover the needs of your life, then everything beyond that is just surplus and the game of wealth. It's the game of the metric of success. Oh, okay, now I earned X amount of dollars. Now pat myself on the back, but it didn't change my lifestyle, because after you hit that certain threshold, you're already at the peak happiness. The $5 million doesn't make you happier.
Well, it didn't change your lifestyle because, like me, you're not that materialistic. I think for a lot of people, they get there and they go super hedonistic, and they're all about that material wealth. And again, that's been scientifically proven to have very little bearing on your happiness. If anything, it's actually been proven to make you unhappy, because it's so hollow, and people pursue that. We see this all the time, and I won't name names, but there's someone who's quite notable in our community who came on my other podcast and talked about this, literally buying like Gucci everything, the bling bling, like going to nightclubs every night and spending $1,000 on a bottle, and lived that lifestyle, and just said he was miserable at the end of it, like completely flat out miserable and broke. And so it really doesn't work.
Okay, so what's the bundle of this? Is that do what you love, the money will follow, and money does not buy happiness. I think that's one of the fundamental points here of an epiphany thing. Yes, you need to make a certain standard of living, and then yes, your life will be better once you're not worried about paying your rent next month, because you have sufficient income to cover the needs of your life. But anything beyond that is just the game of success, and financial increase is just a metric telling you how you're doing in that game.
Yeah.
All right.
That's it. And we just covered some episodes on how to make your money work for you. and that kind of stuff. So all of that, again, I think that alleviates some of that pressure and that stress in life. So if you can get a handle on your finances and kind of reach those base numbers, then, you know, just focus on your happiness and your fulfillment and the impact and serving, as per my initial point. Yeah,
such a good point. All right, what's your next point, Tom?
My next point is active audience. And this sounds incredibly obvious now, and I think there's more teachings around this now, but back in the day, everyone was just talking about top line vanity metrics. How many followers I have, how many email subscribers I have, how much traffic I get. And it took me a lot of years to learn the hard way that none of those numbers matter. What matters is your active audience. So how many of those people actually are engaged and care. So if you've got an email list, how many actually open and click on your emails? If you've got followers, how many engage with your content? If you have an audience, how many buy and turn into customers, and how many people continue to buy and repeat purchase? They are the numbers that matter. And I've talked about this before. If you've got 100,000 people on your email list and only 15,000 open your emails, you really have an email list of 15,000 people. Mm-hmm. And again, it sounds so staggeringly obvious, but to this day, how many people do you see, Mike, who are like constantly celebrating getting as many followers as possible? Right? Yeah. It is so widespread. And I deal with people all the time that are trying to pitch partnerships to me. Now we got 400,000 people on our email list. And when I really press them on the numbers, it's just this complete hollow facade. Where they could have bought those subscribers or got them in shady means or whatever. And I'm like, you have nothing there. Like we've done partnerships. And again, I've learned the hard way. We've done partnerships with people that have 500,000 people that they push stuff out to, and it makes like $300. It's so hollow. So it is all about the engagement of your audience, not the size. That was my paradigm shift.
Active audience. And we talked a lot about this concept in our 1000 True Fans or Finding Your True Fans episode when we talked about the Kevin Kelly big idea. And I didn't have that on my list, but I think that that's the core big idea here. And it was a big idea for a lot of people when that came out. I think it was 2008 when he wrote that. And it was a big idea for a lot of people. And it proved prophetic in the world that we see here now, 12 years later, in the social media world, where there are a lot of accounts that have 300,000 followers and very, very limited engagement, or a huge email list with very, very little open rate. And
you know, when someone tries to collab on social, first thing I do, I go to their comments.
So do I.
See how many they're getting.
Exactly.
So I see the number of comments, and then I go in the comments and see the quality. And if it's 90% Forex traders, then it's not for me.
Yeah. Same thing. I'm with you on that. Okay, so I love this idea of active audience. That's a good second point. I'm going to go to my next one of big ideas that changed my business. 15% of your success comes from your technical skills, and 85% of your success comes from human engineering, your ability to get along with people, leadership, communication, these social skills. This is the botched quote that I just shared from the introduction in How to Win Friends and Influence People. Those of you playing the drinking game can drink.
Drink it long and deep.
But 15% is your technical skills and 85% is your skills in human engineering. I saw this happen in my career. I, at age 28, was managing a team of people at Fox Studios, and many of them were senior to me. But why was I the boss of these people? Why was I running that division? It was because of human engineering. It was because of leadership skills. It was because of running meetings. It was because of the ability to delegate and communicate and all these other little skills, the technical skills that, yes, I did have them, but so did a lot of other people. The difference maker was that the personal skills, that personal interaction. And I think that's a big idea that I didn't really realize even until later on in my career, that it was a differentiator between me and other people that had comparable technical skills. So I see it in hindsight. For those of you listening right now that are younger in your career, start working on your people skills. Start working on your communication and leadership. Start reading some of these books and practicing some of these techniques to improve your human engineering, because it's going to yield big returns for you moving forward in your career.
Let me give you an example of that. So let's take guitar. You play guitar as well as I do, right, Mike?
Yes.
And I mean, like, you also play guitar, not like you play as well as I do.
I was trying to come up with a joke.
Yeah,
I was trying to come up with a joke, and that's why I paused.
You're better at guitar than I am.
I don't know, man. I heard you play. So you know what? We should do a Biz Buds duet sometime.
Yeah,
bust out both our guitars. Okay.
But yeah, there's a ton of incredibly proficient guitarists out there, right?
Yeah.
And they just practice 10 hours a day. They can do all the licks. Like, they're so technically proficient. But why are there millions of those people, but very few successful rock stars? And it's because the rock stars have a combination of, like, you know, they have something to say with their persona and their playing style.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, maybe they're a great songwriter, but also they put the work in, they persevered, they put themselves out there. Often they're quite, you know, a compelling character on a personal level.
The personal branding.
Exactly. Yep. And that's the 85%. And that's what most people who just go to music school and get proficient, they end up being the session musicians behind the scenes. They don't end up being Slash, because they're focused entirely on the 15%, not on the 85%.
Yeah. So and that's a great comment. And I think what we bundle into the 85% then is a recommendation. Listen to our episode on personal branding, because that's part of this human engineering, this creating a brand for yourself and the interaction with people and things. I think that it's a good point, Tom.
Nice.
All right.
Speaking of good points, shall I jump into my next one?
Yes, go number 3 for you.
Okay. My next point is give first. And this has been really huge. I think I used to go into a lot of interactions where I was like trying to get what I needed out of it, because that's what you're taught, right? That's the kind of classic sales mindset. It's like, how do I get what I need from this other person? And it was a combination of, you know, different spaces where I learned about this, but a big one was Gary Vee. That's it. Take a shot, everyone listening. But Gary Vee talks often about in a partnership, he likes the other person to win 51%. And he gets 49%. So they both take something away from it, but he feels better when the other person gets slightly more than he does. And this has just been a game changer for me when it comes to business development, partnerships, and really anything that I do, because I feel like if I can make sure we both win, but the other person walks away feeling like they've kind of, you know, ultimately won and they're slightly better off, that is huge. And so I come very much with a giving mindset first, where it's like, what can I do for the other person? How can I just bring them value? This is back to my first point again. How can I bring them value? And it's been so huge. And when you start doing this, it becomes so obvious that it's the right way, because you start thinking, well, what would the alternative be? Mike, if you and I started working together on something, and every time you walked away from a conversation, you felt like you were losing slightly.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want to keep working with me, right?
No, yeah, it's annoying when you get haggled into that, the 1 or 2% difference that you have to win.
Yeah.
And the other person feels like, they walk away from the table feeling like, well, I lost that battle by 1% difference or the 2% swing. That's frustrating. So giving that up, knowing when you go to the table that you want them to walk away with the feeling like they got the most of the deal.
Yeah, and not just the feeling, like they can literally get the most.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter, because what we both walk away with, like, the sum is greater than the parts, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So we both end up winning. And that has been the principle that has led to, like, partnerships that have lasted 5-10 years.
Yeah.
Where I've just become good friends with the people. We love working together and they feel super good about the situation. It's the best way to do business, in my opinion.
I love it. Good. Okay. So give first and win-win relationships, and not just, you don't lose in that relationship. See, this is the thing that I think is the underlying point, is that there is more more compensation than just monetary. This isn't my next point, but the idea that my compensation is not just how much money did I get out of the other person at the negotiation table. My compensation comes from knowing that I provided a ton of value to them, that I built a new relationship that can be an ongoing partnership over years to come, that I solved a big problem in their business. There's so many other ways that you can be compensated in life other than just financial. And I think there are a lot of people running around out there thinking that they got to come to the negotiation table and they've got to win this deal. I mean,
who wants to work with that guy or girl?
I'm
going to rip your throat out over this deal. Who wants to work with that person?
Exactly. But that exists, and that exists in books of teaching you how to do that, how to negotiate the deal. So anyway, I think that that's a great point, and I live the way that you live also. I'm never, going back to employing people, if they asked for a salary range of $50,000 to $60,000 a year, I never offered them 50. I never offered them the bottom of their range because I always felt like that was too cheap, too lame. I would always offer them 55 or offer them 57 or something on the higher end of their range so that they felt like they were excited to come, not that I was trying to get them for as cheap as possible. So I think there's a lot of little principles that happen, a lot of little things that happen in our businesses using that principle of giving first.
For sure.
All right, my next point that changed my business, and I know I've talked about this one, and anybody who's seen my content knows this one for me. From the E-Myth, systems run the business, people run the systems. Oh my gosh, this changed everything for me. I started creating systematic processes for every single thing in my business so that my people that I was hiring could just follow the process. And we started outputting consistent results for our clients, consistent client experience. It didn't matter if you were working with Nate or Brent, the consistent experience was the same because the processes were the same. And that changed the whole course of my business, that principle alone.
Yeah, I think that's great. And not just from a position of consistency. We do this and, we massively scaled our processes in recent years because it's less room for error, right? Stuff goes wrong when you don't have a process. That's where it blows up in your face, or people feel frustrated, or it falls apart. I've seen it so many times where that happens, and I used to get emotional and be like, did I screw up? Did someone screw up? And now it's like, oh, we just need to tweak the process. Something's not working. We're going to fix the process so it never happens again. And then it becomes like, and another benefit is you can very quickly see if someone's doing their job right or not, because it's not just kind of freestyling. It's like, well, either the process is broken or you told someone to follow a process and they deliberately did not.
Yeah.
One or two things happened.
Exactly. And I love that about my business too. Once I started to look at my business that way, I thought, okay, I've got the system, and if they follow the system, then everything should work out fine. So if something breaks, if the project blows up, if something goes wrong, what do I look at first? I don't look at, oh, Johnny did a bad job, fire him. I don't look at it that way. I look at it and say, oh, what is broken in our system? Because if Johnny followed the system and the project blew up, then the system is broken. That's where you look first.
Yeah.
And then you and Johnny are on the same team. You and Johnny say, hey, let's look at the system together and figure out why did this blow up and what can we put into our system that makes it not blow up in the future. I started to run my whole business that way, and it changed everything in that my employees and I were on the same team trying to solve the system that's going to output the best product possible.
And occasionally, Johnny might just not follow the system.
And that's say, when you have a
Johnny,
bad employee.
It broke here. Here's the part in the system. You see why that went wrong, Johnny? Please, can you follow it? in future. Just tick off each stage. And then Johnny does it again. Come on, Johnny, the system, everyone else is following it. You're still not doing it. This keeps blowing up. This is having a bad impact on the business. And then Johnny does it again. Sorry, Johnny, you're fired.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Yep. Because the people, so then you're hiring people that are qualified to manage the system. That's your metric. Yep. Are they sharp enough, skilled enough to manage the system that you have in place? Now, this is the same thing. It doesn't mean you're just hiring the lowest end people in the world. You're not McDonald's and Walmart, because NASA, the US space program, has systems also, but it's freaking rocket scientists literally following the systems. And so they're the smartest people in the world that are still following systems. So just because you have systems doesn't mean you can hire incapable people. You still need people capable of executing on the tasks in the system.
We've got an analogy internally at my company of what if any one of us got run over by a steamroller tomorrow?
Yeah.
What would happen? And when you don't have the systems in place, it's a very dangerous place to be, because we've had, entire systems and ways of operating that are purely in one person's head.
Yeah.
And if they did get super sick or something like that, that's really, really dangerous for your business. So we've been extracting everything from my head and our team members' heads into these systems we now have in place. And so if someone got sick, if someone got fired, someone wanted to leave, whatever happened, we can then just drop a new person into the system that's already there.
Yeah, exactly right. In the US, we call it being hit by the bus. If we get hit by a bus.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Not run over by a steamroller.
I don't think that's an English thing. That's just our weird CTO.
That's your own thing.
He mainly said it to me. This was in the earlier days when the whole company kind of hung on my shoulders, and he was like, "What if you got hit by a steamroller, Tom?"
Oh boy. All right. So it's not a British.
It's definitely not
phrase. Okay. So when I show up in London and I'm walking around telling people about getting hit by a steamroller, they're gonna look at me like, "What? I thought it was being hit by a bus."
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. What's your next one, Tom?
I got so many, Mike. My next one, we have done an episode on this, but I have to mention it. It's the path of least resistance / product market fit.
Mm-hmm.
And I just love this so much because we talked in that episode about it feeling like pushing a boulder up a hill at times when you're trying to push your business forward. And if you find product market fit, that's where you open up the path of least resistance, and it goes like a rocket, and you just have to hold on for dear life and try and correct the course as best you can. And a great example of this is one of my coaching students, Vanessa. She's been doing workshops and stuff around lettering, and she just started lettering on crystals, believe it or not. These awesome looking crystals, and people went nuts for it. So she's now fulfilling all these pre-orders.
That's
and it's
awesome.
like the most popular thing she's ever done.
Yeah.
And it's so cool. I'm so happy for her, and we're going to work on scaling that. But as we said in that prior episode, she hasn't suddenly become more talented. She just kept trying stuff until something really saw traction.
Yeah.
And now she can just, push it like crazy. And I do this with everything. It's not just products or services. I do it with business partnerships, and I'm increasingly doing it. I'm getting better and better at this. There's a bunch of partnerships recently where I was like, I'm just having to work too hard to push this forward.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's not worth it. And as soon as I double down on the ones that are working and come very easily, then they start to do better. It's about working smart. Like business, yes, it's hard and it takes a lot of effort, but not everything should be like perpetually difficult.
Yeah.
So look for the opportunities where it's like, that's working. That's coming kind of easier than that other thing.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go down that path.
Super good. I hadn't heard that from Vanessa, but she messaged me a couple weeks ago and said her workshops were going awesome. So I hadn't heard the crystal thing, and that's awesome. Interestingly, your last point completely ties into my next point also, and it's about tipping points. Finding tipping points in your business, which is kind of at the heart of what you're saying here. The tipping point came from the book, The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell. Such a great book. Put that on your list if you haven't read it. But the idea is that there's one thing that eventually tips the scale. So the scales are balanced. And then when you put this one little pin on the scale, now all of a sudden it's out of balance. Or this one little, the last little straw that you drop on
analogy.
it comes out of balance in your favor. And so it's the tipping point in your business. And in business, we're looking for these tipping points. We keep grinding, trying to find when is this one little tweak of the dial gonna be the thing that makes our business start to explode. And there are a couple of examples that he uses in the book. And the one that really stuck with me was the resurgence of Hush Puppy shoes. And I think he's referencing it in the late 80s, where Hush Puppy shoes was struggling as a business for years and years and years. And then all of a sudden, their sales started to go crazy. And they tracked back what happened, and they found that it was some girl who was super popular who wore Hush Puppy shoes to a nightclub in New York. And correct me if I'm wrong on this story. I haven't read the book in 20 years, so the story may be a little bit abstracted from reality, but this is the idea. Somebody went to a nightclub. She was super popular, started wearing Hush Puppy shoes, and everybody was like, oh, what are those shoes? And then the next people start buying them, and then the next people and the next people. And the tipping point was this one influencer. This is the first start. This book was one of the first things talking about the idea of influencer marketing before social media even existed. But it's all influencer marketing is what the core heart of Tipping Point is on this, especially this story. So this person, this influencer, wears Hush Puppy shoes, and it becomes the tipping point in turning the tide for Hush Puppy Shoe Company to start becoming profitable and growing again. Now, that's what we're looking for in our businesses. We're looking for tipping points. You mentioned a handful of these when we were talking about product market fit, and that's a good episode to listen to if you want to learn more about this idea of tipping points. But it's tweaking the dials. It's Vanessa doing lettering on crystals, and now all of a sudden it's booming, a booming business opportunity for her. When if it was just lettering on paper, like all the 1 million other people doing that in the world, then it's a struggling business. You transform that into a little thing by tweaking the dial of the surface you're lettering on, and all of a sudden it's a tipping point and things start to explode. That's the exciting thing. Yeah. And that's what we're looking for in our businesses. You're looking for tipping points. So what's the goal? Stay in business long enough to get to the tipping points. And while you stay in business, grinding away, trying to eke out your profit and make it work and figure it out, you're tweaking the dials. Just tweaking it until you change this dial from a 3 to a 3.3. And now all of a sudden, boom, it was the thing that tips the scale in your favor and things start to explode. That idea became big to me when I was running my business because I read that in the early days of hiring people, and I started to look for these tipping points that started to change the course of my business.
And is it not the best feeling on earth?
Oh, so good, man. Yeah.
It is just electric. I love that feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the idea there of tipping points, for sure. And we do this all the time. Like, you know, at my company, Design Cuts, we've launched a bunch of different product sections in our marketplace. And not everyone blows up. Of course not. So the ones that don't really work, we're like, okay, we're not going to focus so much there. And occasionally one just goes nuts. And we're like, oh, cool, let's pursue that. And let's really push that. And so I often say to my students, I'm like, when something's working, do more of it. It's as simple as that. You have to do more of what's working. You have to just be constantly aware, you know, where's the opportunity? Where is the traction? And then lean into that. Like, it's such a powerful thing.
So
I'm glad
good.
you mentioned that. How many points have you got left? I know
I've got 1 point left, and I've got 1 point left. Why don't you do one more and I'll do one more, and then we'll wrap
I was
up.
going to say, I'm going to pick my best remaining one then.
Okay.
So my final point is finding a way to be the best, because and I'm sure I've shared this on the show before, but what I used to do was I would look at successful companies and I would think, well, if I could do 10% as good a job as them, I'm going to make 10% of their gigantic revenue.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously that's not the case. Who wants something that's 10% as good? They're just going to go for the best thing. And it was a real paradigm shift in my career where I realized I need to figure out how to be the best at something. And that's what I did with my company, where I systematically broke down every single facet of all of the competitors in the marketplace. And I figured out how to beat them on every single front, because I knew if I did it on every single front, that would make me the best overall. It wouldn't just be that we were the best in one area. If we were the best in every area, then we could comfortably say we're number one. And when you can do that, a funny thing happens. First of all, product market fit comes much easier because people gravitate to the best offering. But it also gives you so much confidence because you know in the back of your mind if you're fourth best. You really do. When you know that you're having a conversation with a customer and you just deep down know in the pit of your stomach that they'd be better off to go with your competitor because they are genuinely a better offering than you, then that sucks. That's not a confident place to market from. And so, you know, I believe in this. I think this is where things like niching allow for this to become a reality, where maybe you go a bit more narrow or smaller or
smaller pond. Bigger
you step
fish
to the side. Like if you don't have the resources and the skills to be the best, like I'm not about to launch like the best studio in Hollywood, right? That would be impossible for me. So I'm not even going to try and play that game.
Yeah.
I will play a game where I can, you know, confidently be the best.
Yeah. Well, you just keep making the pond smaller until you can be the big fish in the pond. So you're not going to launch the studio in Hollywood, but can you launch a studio in London? And if you can't be the best there, can you launch a studio in your suburb of London and be the best there? Or can you launch a studio on Main Street in the suburb of London? And can you be the best there?
Exclusively like horror movies or something like that?
Yeah. You just keep refining the size of the pond until you can be the big fish in the pond. Now, we talked about this in finding better clients, I think, and maybe even finding your first client. You don't want to make the pond so small that there's no fish in it for you to gobble up. So you need to watch the size of the pond, but that's the idea of
and well, it's not about always being the biggest from day one. I did a case study on my Instagram about Bulb, an energy company. And I think they're the fastest growing startup in UK history. They're now worth $1 billion.
Really?
And they entered the energy sector in the UK, obviously starting from zero. So they were definitely not the biggest. They were competing with some absolute juggernauts, but they grew and they're just grabbing market share like crazy because they're the best.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the dream, is when actually it's a gigantic pond, but where there's a low bar of quality.
Yeah.
And there's a ton of opportunity for this. It's like airlines tend to suck on the whole, right? So there have been better airlines that have come along and grabbed market share because it was kind of this
low-hanging fruit
industry. Low-hanging fruit. Same thing with delivery companies.
Yeah.
They have such a bad rap, right? They do a terrible job on the whole. They're super unreliable. Yeah. So if there's a delivery company that was like the one that Homer starts in The Simpsons, you know, the one where it's all like shiny and like perfect, like, you know, people would gravitate towards that because they're fed up. So you look for the marketplaces where I actually think it's good where there's competition. I think that's really healthy. It proves demand. Yeah. But look around and be like, well, the competition is not that good. So I'm systematically going to beat them.
Yeah. Good. All right. I like that final point from Tommy Ross. We're going to do my final point. This one came to me. I was 28 years old. I got my job offer as a creative director at Fox Studios. I moved from Phoenix, Arizona to LA. And while I was headed there, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to be working with the greatest designers in all the world. I can't believe this. I'm going to work for this entertainment industry company. I'm going to be working with the greatest people because look at what they output. Look at this amazing stuff that they output. And then I got there and those people are going to be on my team. I'm going to be the boss of those people. Oh my gosh, am I even qualified for this? That's what I thought going in there. And within a month, I realized, you know what? These people are talented, no question, but they're no better than the people I was working for at the startup company I was working at in Phoenix. And they're no better than the people that I was working for at my very first job at this little direct marketing company. They're not better than those people. I realized that the people at bigger, greater companies are really no better than you listener of this podcast right now, that you can succeed just as great as these people who you admire, who work at Google and work at Disney and work at all these places. They're not better than you. They're just there and you're not yet. And I realized that in going into this job, that the people out there in the world are no better than me. They're no more capable than me at achieving whatever they're achieving. And that opened the door of opportunity in my mind to think, you know what? If they can do it, I can do it. I started looking at other competing agency owners when I was growing my agency, and I knew, because I had learned this lesson, that so-and-so who had 40 employees was no better than me. I knew that they weren't any better than me. They were just 40 employees and I was 5. I'm going to be 40 someday. So I started to open up my mind to this idea that I can be just as successful as the people who I admire out there in the world. They're no better than me in my ability. And I can promise you, Biz Buddy listener, that the people who are out there working are really no better or more capable than you. They've just found their tipping points. They've created the right systems. They've mastered human engineering. They've done these things that we've talked about on this show. They found product market fit. They've done all these things and they succeed as a result of it, but they're no better than you. They've just figured out how to tweak the dials the right way. That's my last point.
That's a great final point. It's big. I just wrote a note. It kind of makes me want to do a separate follow-up episode, maybe on life lessons.
Life lessons.
Not just business lessons. That could be a fun one.
Is this like the life lesson that your dad made you smoke a whole pack of cigarettes so that you would never smoke again kind of stuff that you hear?
Yeah, I got super addicted. 10 years to quit.
Yeah.
Shall we do the tennis match?
Yes. All right. Let's hammer through these on a recap. Why don't you go first since you started?
So don't use your audience, serve them. Shout out to Chase Reeves, my former business mentor, for that one.
Do what you love. The money will follow. Focus on what you're passionate about and let money be the byproduct.
Understand active audience. Ignore the big, impressive vanity metrics.
15% of your success is due to your technical skills. 85% is due to your ability in human engineering, your people skills, your soft skills, leadership, communication, and so forth.
Give first and engineer a way whereby the other side wins a little bit more than you do, but you both ultimately win.
Systems run the business, people run the systems. Shout out to Michael Gerber on that one. Such a great concept.
Look for the path of least resistance and understand how this factors into product market fit.
Which was a good segue into the idea of tipping points by Malcolm Gladwell. You just keep tweaking the dials till you find that one little adjustment that starts to tip the scales in your favor.
And my final point was figure out how to be the best in whatever space you want to occupy as a business.
And my final point was people, generic word, are no better than you. Successful people are no better than you. They've just solved some of these things. So don't you dare let yourself feel insecure that you can never do it. You can never make it, because the people who have made it are no more capable and no more qualified than you are.
Awesome. That was a fun one. It was light on the banter, but it was very actionable and it was pretty heavy. We did promise some life-changing tips. So I
Yeah,
hope
hopefully
got some takeaways.
got some nuggets out of there. It was light on the banter. I'll bring more banter next time. I'm going to work
just
on
be
my
more entertaining, Mike. Because
I'm going to work on my
gonna help
British
sustain me.
accent between now and then. I'm committed, man.
I know you really are.
Yeah.
I need to work on my American one.
Yeah, no, you got it
Awful,
good, man. Your American one's way better than my British accent.
All right, thank you as always for listening, dear Biz Buddies. I think what could be a fun thing on the back of this episode is tag us up in your stories like always. We always love resharing those, DMing you back, but maybe tag us up in your stories with your biggest takeaway from this episode. What paradigm shift are you going to carry forward in your career to really try and change your working life?
I like that. And let's also throw out, if you tag us too, and you have a major life-changing thing that happened to you that changed the course of your business, share that in your stories too, because we'd love to reshare that type of content to our audience and continue to give more tips to people out there. So if we didn't touch on something that's really valuable to you, shout it out and we'll be sure to share it.
And if their business grows, they need to give us 10% of the upside.
10%.
Right?
Well, yeah. I'll take 9%.
Let's make it 20. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll take 9% to let them win that 1 extra percent. I'm learning from this podcast.
We're so generous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All
So
right.
everyone listening, you can look out for Mike's invoice soon for this advice. No, thank you for listening. Please keep the reviews coming as well on the podcast app. We have been so humbled recently reading them. There's a ton. We've got way more than 50 now. It's like 50 or 60 that have come in, all 5 stars. So we appreciate you a ton. So glad everyone's enjoying the show. And we will see you same time next week.
See you next week. Thank you.